Welcome to part 8 and the final part of this industrial building Blender tutorial series. So in this part we're going to be modeling the trees and placing the trees around the scene and then rendering out the final image. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can purchase the project files with the links in the description. And then one more thing before we start this part, I wanted to let you know about a really great Blender add-on for creating chain mail, chain links, cloth and fabric weaves, scales, and other types of micro meshes. With the Simply Micro Mesh add-on, you can quickly and easily create chain mail, chain links, cloth and fabric weaves, scales, and other types of micro meshes. Select the mesh that you want to add the micro mesh to and make it its own object. Then enable the micro mesh on the object using the add-on. There are many different customizable settings to control, like the size of the micro mesh, as well as the rotation and randomize. The add-on also comes with many different micro mesh types that you can set up in Blender's asset browser to easily change the type of micro mesh. You can find my full add-on review video with the link in the description, and if you purchase the add-on through my affiliate link, you'll be helping to support this channel. So now let's get started by modeling the tree trunk. So what I'm going to do is select everything and I'll just hide it just to get it out of the way. I'll go to the add menu and we're going to add a cylinder. And right behind me on the cylinder settings, just make sure that the vertices are 16 because we don't need to be that much detailed. And then also if I open up the characters right here, I'm going to just turn on one of these characters. So click on the eye here to unhide him, just so I can see that so we can model to the correct scale. So I'll move this guy over here. Let's go into edit mode and I'm going to scale the tree down and then I'll scale the tree up pretty big because it's going to be a pretty big tall tree. So I do want the scale of the tree to be about double the size of a person. So like that. Let's also scale it down so it's really thin, and we'll go into wireframe. We're just going to select the top and make it even thinner there on the top. And then let's add some loop cuts by pressing Ctrl R, and then I can drag the loop cuts around. So we're going to add a few loop cuts, maybe a loop cut here and a loop cut there, and let's go to wireframe. We're just going to make it very slightly curvy just so the tree looks a bit random. So adding a few loop cuts just to make it a little bit curvy. And then here on the bottom, I want to box select this part and scale it up a bit more. Kind of scale these up here. Maybe scale these up so that it's a little bit thicker on the bottom of the tree. And then let's go down here to the bottom. And I want to extrude it down and kind of scale it up quite quickly here because this part down here, this part is going to be the tree trunk where it's actually going into the ground. So it's going to scale up pretty quick right there. And let's select the entire thing and we'll move it up on the Z-axis like that. So the origin point is right there on the bottom, and we'll shade the object smooth. So I'm now going to add the bark material. So I'll go over here to the shading workspace. Let's add a new material and I can call it bark. And then let's click on the principled shader and we'll use the principled texture setup. So I'll press Ctrl-Shift-T. Then in my project files, I'm going to go to the bark folder. So you can download it with the link in the description and then extract the zip file. So I'll go into the bark folder. I'm going to select the normal GL and also the roughness and the color, and then click on principled texture setup. Now if I zoom into the tree bark, you can see it's all stretched, and so I'm going to use a cool box projection to place the textures on the tree trunk. So I'll first put the object into the vector, so it's using the object coordinates, and then on each one of the textures, I'm going to turn the flat to box. So we'll turn the flat to box, and then here, flat to box. And then on the blend value, to blend any seams, I'm going to turn the blend value up to 0.2. So on all these textures, turn the blend value to 0.2. And now you can see that the texture is placed quite evenly on the object. Then we can use the scale value here to scale the texture. So I'm just going to click and drag down to scale all the scale values at the same time, and then I can drag back and forth, and I'm going to scale them up maybe to like a 4 or a 3. I think a 3 is pretty good. So now the bark is evenly placed on the tree. So that's it for that object. Let's go back here to the layout and I'll save this again. So I'm going to move this out of the way and I'm now going to add the leaves. So to add the leaves, I'll go to the add menu. Let's go down here to image and I'm going to add the mesh plane. So this time in the folder with all the textures that I've downloaded, I'm going to go into this leaf texture folder here. So again, the link will be in the description to this leaf texture if you want to download it. And I'm going to select the albedo, that's the same as color, and then I'll click on import images as planes. So now we'll go into the rendered viewport mode and just see how this is looking. And I want to rotate it. Let's rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees so it's flat. Let's go to top view, and I think I also need to rotate this by 90 degrees, by negative 90 degrees so they're pointed up. Let's go here to the shading workspace and let me zoom into the object here. And I also want to add in the transparent. So I'll go to the add menu. I'm going to search for an image texture. Let's drop this down here, and then we will click on open. We're going to go to the same folder and we're going to open up the opacity. So click on open image. On the sRGB here, we're going to change this to non-color because it's not contributing to the base color. And now the color here can go into the alpha. So now you can see that it has that transparency, so we can just see the leaves. Then I also want to add in the normal as well. So let's go to the search. We're going to add another image texture, and we'll open this up as well. In the same folder, we're going to open up the normal map and open image. And then here on the color space, make sure that the color space is set to non-color. We can then plug the color into the normal, and then to convert it to normal data, we're going to search for a normal map node and put it here between the normal and the principled shader. So now you can see the leaves look nice and bumpy. So I'm now going to cut out the leaves. So we'll go back here to the layout, and I'll go into the material preview just so we can see this a bit better. And I'm going to go into edit mode, and then I'll hit the K button for the knife tool. I'm going to click down here in the corner and drag up to here, and then I can just click along here, and I can just click right there, and I'm going to go all along that leaf, place that there, and hit enter, and that's just going to cut out the leaf. Now I can do the same thing for some more leaves, so I'll hit the K button again, drag this up here, and we're just going to cut out maybe like 6 leaves. So just pick some leaves that you like, right there, hit enter. This one here, I want to add another cut right there, like that. All right, let's add another cut, so we'll cut out this leaf, so we can start here, go over, we can go up here and along. All right, so I'm going to cut out just about 6 leaves. All right, and then like this one here, you can see if you want to cut out this leaf, but it added a cut here, you can select both of the faces and press F to fill that face. So now you can go back to the knife tool, and you can go along here and you can cut out that leaf. All right, let's do this leaf as well. So go along here, cut out that leaf, and we'll do some of these bigger ones up here. So we'll cut out this one, and let's also cut out this leaf as well. All right, so I've cut out enough leaves, so I'm going to select these leaves here. So this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then I'll press P, and we're going to separate by selection. And that was actually 5 leaves, so I'm also going to select this one, hit P and separate by selection. Let's go back to object mode, so we can move this over here. We don't actually need this, so I can now delete it. So now this leaf and this leaf, I want to join these leaves together because I just want it to be one object for the entire branch. So I'll just hit Control J to join them together, so they are now one object. So now in edit mode, I'm going to use the face select. We're just going to select each leaf, and just for now, I'll kind of align them up so they're a bit easier to use and place. So now I'm going to create a branch. So I'll go to the add menu and I'll add a plane, and we're doing this plane in edit mode. We're adding it in edit mode so that it's in the same object. And I'll scale it way down, and we'll squish it way down here, and we'll scale it up a little bit like that. And I'll add some loop cuts here. So press Control R to add some loop cuts. And we're just going to kind of change the shape of that twig there. So let's move this over here. Move this over here, make it a bit random, so it's kind of moving at a random shape. And then also as it gets to the end, we can scale it down, so it gets smaller as it goes down. But then here at the starting, it's going to be a bit thicker. And let's also move it right up here. I want to move it over here so that the very starting of the branch is right there where the origin point is. So then I can add a few more loop cuts just to make the branch a little bit more smooth and kind of have it curvy. So now if I press the L key to select the entire branch, I'll hit the U button, and I'm going to do unwrap. But for this object, I'm actually going to do the unwrap project from view. So it's going to be projected from the top view down. Now if we go over here to the UV editing, I can zoom in here, and for some reason it shows the normal map. So if you want to preview the color map, we can click here, and we can preview the albedo instead. So here's the UV editing, so I'm going to select it, and I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to stick it right here on this branch. We can also scale it up if we want to make it a bit thicker, and then I can just box select each one of the pieces here, each one of the faces, and we can just rotate it and move it along. We can just place the branch on that branch texture. So I'm really glad that this leaf texture just happened to have a branch texture because it works perfectly for our scene. So let's zoom into the object now, and you can see it just has a very subtle texture. So let's go back here to the layout, and I'll go into edit mode. So we'll go to the face select now, and I'm going to select the leaves, and I'll move them around, and I'm going to place them on the tree. So now we can select the leaves and move them around and place them on the branch. But before I do that, I do want to add just a little bit of 3D-ness to the leaves because right now they're really flat. So I'll hit the K button for the knife tool, and I'm going to click here on one of the corners and drag over and click here on another corner where the vertex is, and then press enter, and then hit the K button for the knife tool again. And we're just going to continue to do that for a lot of the leaves. So adding just a couple of cuts so that there's basically like one face in the very center. So cut that there. This here, we can have this go over here, And this one we can do there, and we'll just do that for the rest of the leaves. All right, that's good. So now what I can do is I can select each one of the faces here, which are in the very center of the leaf, and I can move it up on the Z-axis just a little bit like that. And then if I go back to the object mode, I will just shade this object smooth. But now the leaves look a bit more 3D. So now what I can do is just box select a leaf, and I can rotate it and move it around, and I can scale it, and I'm gonna just stick each leaf along here along the branch. All right, so that one there, we'll put one here kind of at the very end. This one here we'll also put right over there, and then this one here, move over right there. And then if we go down here, I just wanna make sure that the leaf is at the same exact position where the branch is, so that's good. Now the entire branch, I want the entire branch to kind of curve over a bit. So if we just select a face kind of in the middle, I can turn on the proportional editing, and then I can bring it up on the Z-axis, and let's scroll our mouse wheel to change the size of the proportional editing. We can just kind of make that branch so it kind of curves over a little bit. So something like that, so you can now see it curves over, and let's bring it down on the Z-axis like that. So now that branch kind of nicely curves over. So now I can just continue to duplicate the leaves. You can duplicate them. Let's turn off the proportional editing. You can rotate them and scale the leaves. Just duplicate some different leaves and just put them along the branch. You can also give each one a random scale just to make it look random. So some of these leaves I'll have maybe a bit smaller, and other leaves I'll have a little bit bigger. Now you can also rotate the leaves and have some of them going down a little bit, and then other ones you can have kind of coming up a bit, just to make it a bit more random and natural. So that is going to be it for the first branch. So we're going to have 3 of them. The other 2 are going to be similar, but they're going to be a bit smaller. So I'll duplicate this, move it over here. We can start just by selecting everything in edit mode, and we can scale it on the x-axis by -1 just to invert it, just to make it look a bit random. Then we can also turn on the proportional editing, and in edit mode, using the proportional editing, we can kind of rotate it just to make it look a bit random and different. We can also make it a bit smaller. So I think what I'll do is select some of the leaves here, and we can just delete some of the leaves, and we're gonna make this a bit smaller. Let's also delete these vertices here so the entire thing is a bit smaller, so it looks a little bit different. And we can just kind of change the shape of the leaf, change the shape of the branch to make it look a bit different. And then I'll turn the proportional editing off, and I'll duplicate some of these, and I'll just make a few more leaves here and there on the branch. So there's the first one, and there's the second one. So I'm going to take the first one, duplicate it one more time, and we'll go into edit mode, and I want to select a lot of the branch, actually most of the branch. So we'll select that there. Let's not select this here. And I'm just going to delete all the vertices, select those vertices and delete them. So now we want to select everything, and we want to move all the mesh over here so that the origin is at the very end. And now we can just kind of select these, kind of rotate them. Let's put this one over here, maybe bring it down and scale it down a bit. Maybe move this one around, put this one over here into the branch, and then maybe duplicate this one, put it there. So we're just going to have a really tiny branch. So there we go. And then also in edit mode, let's bring it down on the Z-axis. We're going to stick it there so the very end of the branch is right where the origin is. So now you can see we have 3 different branches, and we can place those onto the tree. Now there is one more thing that I want to do to the material, and that is that I want to add some translucency, because if I go into the rendered viewport mode, let's look around here. You can see if I look at the bottom of the leaves, normally there would be light shining through the leaves because leaves have translucency. So we're going to be adding that. So we'll go back to the shading workspace, and we're going to add a new node here. So let's add the translucent shader. We'll drop this here. And then we can also add the mix shader. We'll put the mix shader after the principled, and we're going to make the translucency and the principled shader together. So the translucence will be at the top one, and the principled shader will be at the bottom one. So now we need to add some sort of texture, and this actually comes with a translucent image. So let's go to the add menu. We're going to search for an image texture, and we'll open the image texture. And back here in the same folder, you can see this has a translucency map. So we'll open the image, and then we'll put the color into the color of the translucency. So now if you look down here on the bottom, you can see some of the leaves have more translucency, and so light is going through the leaves. So that's looking great. And then right here on the mix shader, I'm going to turn this up to a 0.6. So if you turn it all the way up, you can see there's no translucency. If you turn it all the way down, it's fully translucent. So I just want to add a little bit of translucency. So let's go back here to the layout, and we'll go back to solid view. I'm going to select these 3 branches, and I'm going to just go to front view, and I'm going to move them way down, kind of out of the way of the scene. And then let's also select the tree branch here, or the trunk, and move it over. And I'll press Alt-H to bring back all the objects. So I can just bring this over here, and we can just start to build the tree now. Now, if I select these 3 branches here with the leaves, I'm going to hit the M key to move them into a new collection, and I'm going to call this branches, and then click on create. So now here in the outliner, if I just close these, we now have a branches collection. Now you can see that all of these objects here, unfortunately, they weren't added into the buildings collection. So if I just click and drag, I can box select all these objects here, and let's drag them into the buildings collection, and these here, put them into the buildings collection. So we have the branches, we also have the grass here, there's the grass, and then we have the characters, and of course the backup. All right, so we'll select the branch now, and let's go to the geometry nodes workspace so we can add geometry nodes. So we'll click on new to add new geometry nodes. I can just call it tree. So we'll go to the add menu, and we're gonna first search for the distribute points on faces node. And then also we're gonna search for the instance on points node. We'll put this here, and then to be able to see the original geometry, again, we need to search for the join geometry. We'll put it here after the instance on points, and the original geometry can go into the geometry of the join geometry so we can see the original mesh. So now let's go to the add menu, and we're gonna search for the collection info node. We'll put this here, and on the collection info, we wanna choose the branches. So we'll put the instance here into the instance on points, and then we need to turn on the separate children, reset children, and pick instance, and now you can see they're randomly placed on the tree. So now I can turn up this density here to add more of them. And I want to click on the random here, and I want to change this to Poisson disk so that we have the distance minimum value. And I'm going to turn the distance minimum value to a 0.01, just so there is a little bit of minimum distance. And then I can turn up the density max and turn it up quite big. So then I also want to add random values for the rotations and the scales, because right now they're all just pointed off at one side. So let's go to the add menu. We can search for the random value. We'll duplicate this so there are 2 random values because we're going to use one for the scale and one for the rotation. So on the rotation, let's click on the float, and we're going to change this to vector, and that way we have the X, Y, and Z values for the minimum and the maximum. So we'll put the value into the rotation. So now on all these values, I'm going to start by turning them to 0, but then I want to turn this bottom one here, which is the Z axis. I want to turn this up to a large number. So I'll type in TAU for tau. That's going to make sure that they're going all the way around. So now it looks quite random. And then here on the x-axis and the y-axis, we can turn these up a little bit. So this middle value, I'm just going to turn to a 0.1. So there's just a little bit of randomness, kind of a random rotation. And then also on the maximum value, I'm going to turn to a -1. And that way they're all kind of moving down a bit. So that looks a bit nicer. And then let's take the other random value, and we're going to put that into the scale. And then we can change the scale values and make it random. So on the maximum value, I'm going to turn this to like a 0.7. And on the minimum value, I'm going to turn this to like a 0.2. So let's see how the scale is looking. That's pretty good. I might turn the maximum value actually down to like a 0.6 and the minimum value up to like a 0.3. So there's not quite as much contrast between the scales. All right, and then if we go up here to the distribute points on faces, I can turn the density max up, and I'm going to start by turning it up really big to maybe like a 2000. So there are lots of them. That's looking pretty good. But then right here on the very bottom, I don't want there to be any of the branches right on the very bottom because that's where the trunk is going to be. So we're going to be weight painting, and we're just going to weight paint it so that only the branches are going to be at the top here. So let's click on object mode, and we're going to go to weight painting. And then just to hide the branches for now, if we go to the geometry nodes, we'll click on this button here just to disable it in the viewport. And we can now just go along here and we can start to paint. However, right now it's set to a subtract. So let's change it to add instead. And then let me make my brush bigger, and I'll just go along here, and we want to start by painting pretty much all this red on the top, but then just down here on the very bottom, that's going to be left at blue. But all the rest is going to be fully red. So just make sure that all those vertices there are fully red and on the top there. So now we can unhide the geometry nodes just to see the leaves. And we want to take this density factor value, and we want to put this into the group input extra socket here. Now here on the side panel, we have the input attribute toggle. So I'll click on this, and on the density factor, we can choose the point group float, and this is telling it to just use the weight painting. And then one more thing we can do, if we go into edit mode and we go to wireframe and just select the top here, if we scale it down, there's going to be less branches. And I do want there to be kind of less branches on the top and more at the bottom. So I might scale these down so there's a bit less. But then here in the middle of the tree, I might scale this up a little bit. So I might scale the vertices out a little bit. So the center of the tree is a bit thicker, And by making it thicker, there's going to be more branches showing up. And maybe the bottom here, thicken that up a little bit. So that's looking pretty good. And then finally here on the density max, I'm going to change this to a value of 3000. So there are lots there. That doesn't actually mean there's going to be 3000. That's just the amount of density. So I'll go into rendered view just to kind of see how that's looking. Now there is one thing that I want to do to that bark material, which I forgot to do earlier. And that is that the bark material looks really bright and I want to make it more of a brown color. So let's click here to go to the shading workspace. And then here in the shader nodes, I will just search for an RGB curves. Let's drop it here. Let's zoom into the tree and I'll go into the rendered view so we can see what that's looking like. And I just want to turn the color down a bit so that it's a bit darker. So something like that is a bit better. So let's go back here to the layout and I'll save this again. And then we can hide the branches collection because we don't need that. And I can select the tree and we'll move the tree over here. And I'm going to stick the tree right here in the 3D scene. So for the first tree, I'm going to stick it right here. We're just going to stick it right here underneath this one. So we'll put that right there. Then I will duplicate this tree and we're going to put another tree over here. And let's go into edit mode and I'm going to scale this tree a bit bigger, make it a bit taller. You can also, to make it more random, you can kind of select some of the vertices and rotate them and scale them just to make each tree look a little bit different. And you can also, in object mode, rotate it around the z-axis to give it a random rotation, just so each tree looks a little bit different. Let's also go into the camera view, see how that's looking. So this tree should be a little bit higher and I want to bring it over a little bit. And then I want to duplicate this to have another tree. This one I'll maybe make it a random scale so it's slightly smaller and we'll rotate it around a bit. And then I will duplicate this again, move this over here and rotate that around a little bit. So there are 3 trees right there and maybe these ones I'll move over a little bit so there's a bit more space in between each tree. That's looking pretty good. And I might even want to duplicate this one more time and give it another random rotation. Now, another useful thing which you can do to make the scene less dense is you can press Alt-D instead of Shift-D. So Alt-D will duplicate it, but it's going to have the same data. So you can see if I move this around, it has the same object's data as the other one. However, I don't want to do this for all the trees because I do want to scale some of the trees and change how the shape of the tree is. So I don't want to do that for all of them. But if your scene is acting a bit laggy and if all of these branches here are kind of lagging up the scene, then you could use Alt-D instead of Shift-D so it keeps the same amount of data. So that way the file size will be less. Another thing you could do if the scene is laggy is turn off the geometry nodes in the viewport by clicking on that button. So you won't be able to see it in the viewport, but it'll still show up in the render. And then another thing you can do, of course, is to hide the grass. So the same thing applies. You can select the grass and click on this monitor icon just to hide the grass from the viewport so it's not quite as laggy if your scene is getting laggy. So I'll duplicate this, move it over. Let's move it over here like that. I'll go into edit mode and this tree I want to scale down a bit, maybe scale the whole thing down a bit and move it down so that this tree is a bit smaller. All right, so let's have a small one, maybe move it forward a little bit, have a small one there. And then for this one, I'll press Alt-D to duplicate that, maybe just scale up in object mode a little bit, and we'll give it a random rotation. So now I have 2 trees there on the front. And then this one here, let's duplicate this one. I can give it a random rotation and we'll go into edit mode and just change the shape of it a little bit and move it over here. We'll kind of stick it here in this corner. And then I'll use Alt-D so it keeps the same object's data. Rotate that over, Alt-D again, rotate that over. And then finally, I just want to have one more tree over at the end. So I'll duplicate this way over here, move it over, and we'll put one more tree farther back. And maybe this one could be a bit of a larger tree. All right, let's go into the camera view. We'll go into the rendered mode just to see how this is looking. And I can actually just hide the characters. So I'm going to click on that button there in the outliner just to hide the characters. So then this tree here, it's kind of covering up some of the windows. So I think I want to move it back a little bit. And maybe we can move all the trees back away from the building just a little. That looks a little bit better. Maybe this one here, I'll bring this tree over just a little bit. Now, these trees do look slightly dark. I think that the material is slightly dark on the leaves, so I do want to make them just a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to do is go back to solid view and I'll unhide the branches collection. Let's go over here and select the branches and I'll go here to the shading workspace. But then I'll go back into the camera view just so I can see it. So let's zoom in here to the trees, and one thing that I could do is I could take this mix shader here, which is blending between the translucent and the principled shader, and if I drag the factor up a bit, that is going to make them a bit brighter, so you could do that if I wanted to. So I might turn this to like a 0.7, maybe that looks a bit better. And then another thing I could do is I could search for a hue saturation value, and I could put this after the base color, and then I could use this and just turn the value up to make the trees a little bit brighter. You could also use an RGB curves just to change the color of the leaves a little bit if you wanted to. So I'll just go back here to the layout now. So what I'm now going to do is add a depth of field. So we'll select the camera. Let's click here to go to the object data properties of the camera. Let's turn on depth of field, and on the focus object, if we click here, I'm going to choose this chair because this chair is pretty much in the center of the scene. So now if I go up into the rendered view, just see how that's looking. We'll first turn the f-stop way down, and you can see everything's pretty blurry except where the tree is. So now I can turn the f-stop up to make less of an f-stop or have less of an effect of that. And I'm going to turn the f-stop to 2 because this is a pretty large scene. It's not a close-up scene, it's more of an environment scene. I want the depth of field to be kind of subtle, so I'm going to turn it up to 2. So if I zoom way in here, you can kind of see there is a little bit of blur, but it is pretty subtle. But then right here, pretty much everything in the scene is in focus. So let's go over the render settings. So I'm going to go here to the render settings. Actually, let's go here to the output settings first, and I'm going to render this as a 2K image. So I'll render it as 2560 by 1440, but you could also just use 1080p if you want to. Let's go here to the render properties, and I'll open up the sampling. And here on the render samples, I'm going to turn this up to 300 because I want it to look really nice. And then I'll also turn on the denoise. You can also open up the light path settings right here, and you can open up the max bounces. And if you turn the light path down, then the scene will render a bit faster. So if it is rendering a bit slow, I might just turn the total to 2 for all these, the diffuse and glossy to 2. And we don't need any transmission, so I could also turn the transmission down. Now the transparent, we do need a little bit of transparent. You can see the windows get all dark if I don't have the transparency turned up. But if I just turn the transparency up to a small number, I believe a 2 is all we need. It looks like if I just turn the transparent level to 2, now Blender won't have to calculate as many bounces for the transparency, so you can still see through the windows, but it will render a bit faster. And we also don't need the filter glossy, and we also can turn off the caustics here. So I'll press Ctrl S to save my project, and then I can render this by hitting F12. And the image is finished rendering, so now to save the image, you can click on Image and just save your image. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I hope you were able to get a great result. And if you enjoy my videos and you'd like to help support me and this channel, then a great way to do that is by checking out my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. So on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, I have lots of Blender content like 3D models and assets, tutorial files, artwork project files, procedural materials, geometry node modifier setups, and lots more Blender content on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. So if you'd like to help support my channel monthly, then joining one of my Patreon memberships is a great way to do that. Or if you'd just like to purchase one of my products, then my Gumroad store is also a great way to do that. And you can also purchase the finished project files of this tutorial if you'd like to use it as study material or use any of the models in your projects. And I did mention this at the beginning of the tutorial series, but if creating these type of environments is something that you're interested in, then I highly recommend checking out CG Boost's course, Master Urban Environments. It's a very detailed and thorough course, and I've reviewed it myself, and I can highly recommend it, and it's a really great course for learning how to create urban environments. And I do have an affiliate link in the description, so if you do purchase that course through my affiliate link, then I'll earn a small commission, so that's a great way to help support this channel. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in a future tutorial.